How to Become Confident, a complete guide to unshakable self-confidence. Confidence is one of the most misunderstood concepts in human psychology. Most people think they know what it means. They picture the person at the party who talks to everyone, the executive who commands the boardroom, the athlete who never seems to doubt themselves. But these images, while not entirely wrong, miss the deeper truth about what confidence actually is and how it works. Confidence is not a personality trait. It is not something you are born with or without. It is not a permanent state of being that some people possess and others lack. Confidence is a skill, a learnable, developable, practicable skill that can be cultivated by anyone willing to do the work. At its core, confidence is simply trust. Specifically, it is trust in yourself. It is the belief that you can handle what comes your way, that you have the resources, internal and external, to navigate challenges, recover from setbacks, and achieve your goals. This is a fundamentally different definition from the one most people carry around. Most people believe confidence is the absence of fear. They think that confident people do not feel nervous, anxious, or uncertain. This is entirely wrong. Confident people feel all of these things. The difference is that they do not let these feelings stop them. They feel the fear and act anyway. They feel the uncertainty and move forward regardless. Consider the example of Sarah, a young woman who dreamed of becoming a public speaker. For years, she avoided any opportunity to speak in front of groups. She told herself she was not confident enough. She imagined that confident speakers felt no fear, no butterflies, no racing heart. She believed that unless she could eliminate these feelings, she could never speak publicly. Then Sarah attended a workshop where she met several professional speakers. She was shocked to discover that every single one of them experienced stage fright. Some had techniques for managing it, some had simply learned to accept it. But none of them were free from it. One speaker, a woman who had keynoted conferences for 20 years, told Sarah, "I still get nervous before every talk. The difference is that I no longer let the nervousness make the decision for me." This revelation changed Sarah's understanding of confidence. She realized that she had been waiting to feel confident before taking action, when in fact confidence comes from action. She began speaking at small events, local meetups, community groups, workplace presentations. Each time she was nervous. Each time she spoke anyway. And each time, the experience became slightly less terrifying and slightly more familiar. Within 2 years, Sarah was speaking at regional conferences. She still got nervous, but she also knew, with absolute certainty, that she could handle it. That is confidence. The confidence spectrum. Confidence is not binary. It exists on a spectrum. You can be highly confident in one area of your life and deeply insecure in another. A brilliant surgeon might be confident in the operating room, but terrified of public speaking. A charismatic salesperson might be confident with clients, but anxious in romantic relationships. This is important, because it means that building confidence does not require a wholesale transformation of your personality. It requires targeted work on specific areas of your life. You can be confident in your career while still working on your social confidence. You can be confident in your relationships while still building your professional confidence. The difference between high confidence and low confidence individuals is not the presence or absence of doubt. It is how they relate to that doubt. High confidence individuals acknowledge doubt and then choose to act despite it. Low confidence individuals acknowledge doubt and then use it as a reason to avoid action. This is the fundamental insight that underlies everything in this book. Confidence is not a feeling. It is a decision. It is the decision to trust yourself enough to take action, even when you are uncertain, afraid, or doubtful. The neuroscience of confidence. From a neurological perspective, confidence is associated with activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and self-regulation. When you are confident, your prefrontal cortex is in charge, overriding the more primitive fear responses generated by the amygdala. When you are lacking confidence, your amygdala is in charge. It is generating fear responses that are designed to keep you safe, but are actually keeping you stuck. The amygdala does not distinguish between a genuine threat and a perceived one. It reacts the same way to a charging lion and to a challenging conversation with your boss. Understanding this neurological basis of confidence has practical implications. It means that you can build confidence by strengthening your prefrontal cortex and weakening your amygdala's grip. How do you do this? Through practices that build self-regulation, meditation, exercise, goal setting, and, most importantly, repeated exposure to the things that frighten you. Every time you face a fear and survive, you weaken the amygdala's hold and strengthen the prefrontal cortex's ability to manage emotional responses. This is not metaphorical. It is a literal, physical change in the brain. Neuroplasticity means that your brain rewires itself based on your experiences. Every courageous act literally builds a more confident brain. Life example: James, a software engineer, had crippling social anxiety. He avoided team meetings, ate lunch alone, and communicated with colleagues exclusively through email. His career was stagnating because he could not advocate for his ideas or collaborate effectively with others. James decided to build his confidence systematically. He started with the smallest possible step, saying good morning to one colleague each day. This simple act was terrifying for him, but he did it anyway. After 2 weeks, he added a second step, asking one question in team meetings. The physical sensation was intense. His heart raced, his palms sweated, his voice trembled. But he persisted. Over 3 months, he gradually increased the difficulty of his social challenges. By the end of 6 months, he was leading team meetings and presenting his projects to senior management. James did not become a different person. He did not lose his introversion or his preference for solitude, but he built the confidence to step outside his comfort zone when the situation demanded it. And that made all the difference. Chapter 2: The Psychology of Self-Confidence. To build confidence effectively, you need to understand the psychological mechanisms that create it and the ones that destroy it. Self-confidence is not random. It follows predictable patterns that can be understood, manipulated, and redirected. Self-efficacy, the engine of confidence. Psychologist Albert Bandura introduced the concept of self-efficacy, which he defined as the belief in one's ability to succeed in specific situations. Self-efficacy is the engine that drives confidence. When you believe you can do something, you are more likely to attempt it, persist through difficulties, and ultimately succeed. Bandura identified 4 sources of self-efficacy, and understanding them gives you a roadmap for building confidence. Mastery experiences. The most powerful source of self-efficacy is direct experience. When you successfully complete a task, your belief in your ability to complete similar tasks increases. This is why small wins matter so much. Each success builds on the last, creating a positive feedback loop of confidence. Vicarious experiences. Watching others succeed, especially people similar to you, also build self-efficacy. When you see someone who looks like you, who comes from a similar background, achieving something you aspire to, it becomes more believable that you can achieve it too. This is why representation matters and why role models are so important. Verbal persuasion. When someone you trust tells you that you can do something, it can increase your self-efficacy, at least temporarily. This is why coaches, mentors, and supportive friends are so valuable. Their belief in you can sustain you until your own belief catches up. Physiological states. Your physical state affects your psychological state. When you feel strong, healthy, and energized, you feel more confident. When you are tired, sick, or stressed, confidence wanes. This is why exercise, sleep, and nutrition are not just physical health strategies. They are confidence-building strategies. Life example: Maria, a first-generation college student, had never known anyone who attended university. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, college was something other people did. The idea of her pursuing a degree felt absurd, almost pretentious. Then Maria met Carmen, a woman from her neighborhood who had earned a master's degree and was working as a social worker. Carmen's presence was revolutionary for Maria. She was living proof that someone from their background could succeed in academia. Through vicarious experience, Maria's self-efficacy increased. She began to believe that if Carmen could do it, perhaps she could too. Maria also had a high school teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, who told her repeatedly that she was intelligent enough for college. His verbal persuasion, combined with Carmen's vicarious example, gave Maria the courage to apply. She was accepted, and after 4 years of hard work, including many moments of doubt, she graduated with a degree in psychology. Maria's story illustrates how the sources of self-efficacy work together. Vicarious experience provided the possibility. Verbal persuasion provided the encouragement. And mastery experiences, each successful exam, each completed paper, each semester finished, built the self-efficacy that carried her to graduation. The role of self-esteem. Self-esteem and self-confidence are related but distinct concepts. Self-esteem is your overall sense of worth as a person. Self-confidence is your belief in your ability to handle specific tasks or situations. You can have high self-esteem and low confidence in particular areas, or low self-esteem and high confidence in specific domains. Research shows that self-esteem is most strongly influenced by your relationships, particularly your early relationships with caregivers. If you were loved unconditionally as a child, you likely developed a baseline of self-worth that persists into adulthood. If you were loved conditionally, only when you performed well, behaved correctly, or met certain standards, you may struggle with self-esteem regardless of your achievements. The good news is that self-esteem, like confidence, can be developed. It requires challenging the internalized messages from your past and replacing them with more accurate, compassionate self-assessments. This is the subject of Chapter 6, but the basic principle is this: you are worthy of love and respect simply because you exist, not because of what you do or achieve. The confidence-competence loop. There is a natural relationship between confidence and competence. When you are competent at something, you feel confident doing it. When you feel confident, you are more willing to practice and improve, which increases your competence. This creates a positive loop, but the loop can also work in reverse. When you lack competence, you feel insecure. When you feel insecure, you avoid the activity, which prevents you from building competence. This creates a negative loop that can trap you for years. The key to breaking a negative confidence-competence loop is to start small. Do not try to become competent at everything simultaneously. Choose one area, accept that you will be a beginner, and commit to gradual improvement. The confidence will come as the competence grows. Life example: David, a 45-year-old accountant, had always wanted to learn guitar, but had never started because he was convinced he had no musical talent. He watched his nephew, a teenager, pick up songs effortlessly and concluded that musical ability was something you were born with or not. Then David's wife bought him a guitar lesson package for his birthday. Reluctantly, he attended the first lesson. He was terrible. His fingers could not form the chords. His timing was off. He felt humiliated. But the teacher, a patient woman named Alina, told him something that changed his perspective. You are not failing. You are learning. Every great guitarist started exactly where you are right now. David committed to practicing for 30 minutes every day. After a month, he could play 3 simple songs. After 3 months, he could play a dozen. After a year, he was playing at family gatherings and his nephew was asking him for lessons. The confidence David built in guitar spilled over into other areas of his life. He started taking on new challenges at work, volunteered to lead a project, and even joined a local Toastmasters group. The competence he developed in one area gave him the courage to develop competence in others. Cognitive biases that undermine confidence. Your brain is wired with several cognitive biases that can systematically undermine your confidence. The spotlight effect makes you believe that others are paying far more attention to your mistakes and flaws than they actually are. In reality, most people are too busy worrying about themselves to notice your shortcomings. The negativity bias causes you to give more weight to negative experiences than positive ones. One criticism can outweigh 10 compliments, distorting your self-perception. The comparison trap, the tendency to compare your behind the scenes with everyone else's highlight reel, is amplified by social media, creating a distorted view of how you measure up. The imposter syndrome tells you that your successes are due to luck, timing, or deception rather than your actual abilities, preventing you from internalizing your achievements. Understanding these biases does not automatically eliminate them, but it allows you to catch them in action and question their validity. When you notice yourself thinking everyone noticed your mistake, you can remind yourself of the spotlight effect. When you cannot stop comparing yourself to others, you can remind yourself that you are seeing their best moments, not their reality. Chapter 3: Why You Lost Your Confidence. If confidence is a natural state, and it is, as a Chinese letter a child will tell you, then something must have happened to take it away. Understanding what eroded your confidence is the first step to rebuilding it. Childhood and conditioning. The seeds of confidence, or the lack of it, are planted in childhood. Children are naturally confident. They try new things without fear of failure. They speak their minds without worrying about judgment. They take risks without calculating the consequences. This natural confidence is shaped by 3 primary influences: parents, teachers, and peers. Parents, who provide unconditional love and support, raise confident children. They celebrate effort, not just results. They allow failure and treat it as a learning opportunity. They encourage independence and risk-taking within safe boundaries. Parents who provide conditional love that depends on performance, behavior, or achievement, raise children who tie their worth to external validation. These children learn that they are only as good as their last success, that mistakes are unacceptable, and that love must be earned through performance. Teachers can either reinforce or undermine the messages children receive at home. A teacher who recognizes and nurtures a child's strengths can build confidence that compensates for a difficult home environment. A teacher who criticizes, compares, or shames can destroy confidence even in a child who was previously secure. Peers become increasingly influential as children grow older. Social acceptance, popularity, and the ability to fit in become central concerns. Peer rejection, bullying, or exclusion can be devastating to a child's developing confidence. Life example: Lisa grew up in a household where love was conditional on achievement. Her parents praised her when she brought home straight A's and withdrew affection when her grades slipped. She learned early that her worth was determined by her performance. This created a paradox. Lisa was extremely high-achieving but deeply insecure. She graduated at the top of her class, earned an MBA from a prestigious university, and landed a coveted position at a consulting firm. But inside, she felt like a fraud. She believed that if people saw the real her, the imperfect, uncertain, struggling her, they would reject her. Lisa's confidence was entirely dependent on external validation. When her boss praised her work, she felt temporarily secure. When she received constructive criticism, she spiraled into self-doubt. She could not separate her performance from her identity, which meant that every professional setback felt like a personal annihilation. The critical event in Lisa's confidence journey came when she was passed over for a promotion she had expected to receive. The rejection triggered a crisis that forced her to examine the foundation of her self-worth. With the help of a therapist, she began to untangle her identity from her achievements. She started to understand that she was valuable as a person, regardless of her professional success. This was the beginning of genuine confidence that was not dependent on external circumstances. Traumatic experiences. Trauma can profoundly affect confidence. Experiences of abuse, neglect, violence, loss, or betrayal can shatter your trust in yourself, others, and the world. Trauma rewires the brain to be constantly on alert, scanning for threats, and expecting the worst. People who have experienced trauma often develop what psychologists call negative core beliefs, deeply held convictions that they are worthless, unlovable, or powerless. These beliefs operate below the surface of conscious awareness, influencing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in ways that are difficult to recognize. Life example: Michael was sexually abused by a coach during his teenage years. The abuse lasted for 2 years and ended only when the coach left the school. Michael told no one. He was ashamed, confused, and convinced that the abuse was somehow his fault. The impact on Michael's confidence was profound and long-lasting. He avoided physical intimacy, struggled with trust, and felt fundamentally different from other men. He believed that if anyone learned what had happened to him, they would see him as damaged and reject him. It took Michael nearly 20 years to seek help. In therapy, he slowly began to understand that the abuse was not his fault, that his shame was a normal response to an abnormal experience, and that his negative beliefs about himself were not accurate reflections of reality. The process of rebuilding confidence after trauma is slow and requires professional support, but it is absolutely possible. Michael's journey demonstrates that even deeply rooted insecurity can be healed with the right help and sufficient courage. Social comparison and cultural messages. The society we live in sends constant messages about what we should be, how we should look, what we should achieve, and how we should feel about ourselves. These messages, from media, advertising, social networks, and cultural norms, create a standard of comparison that is often unrealistic and unattainable. Social comparison is a natural human tendency, but in the age of social media, it has become pathological. You are constantly exposed to carefully curated images of other people's lives, their successes, their relationships, their bodies, their possessions. Comparing your unedited reality to their edited highlights is a recipe for insecurity. Life example: Aisha, a college student, found her confidence eroding steadily throughout her sophomore year. She had always been a confident person, outgoing, social, comfortable in her own skin. But after joining Instagram and spending hours each day scrolling through posts from her classmates, she began to feel inadequate. Her friends seemed to have better grades, more active social lives, more attractive appearances, and more interesting experiences. She compared her body to the bodies in fitness posts, her social life to the party photos, and her academic performance to the grade-related celebrations she saw in her feed. Aisha did not realize that the comparison was distorted. She was comparing her worst moments to everyone else's best moments. She was comparing her internal experience, with all its doubts, fears, and insecurities, to everyone else's external presentation, which was designed to look effortless and perfect. The turning point came when Aisha took a break from social media for 30 days. During that month, her self-esteem improved dramatically. She realized that much of her insecurity had been manufactured by a platform designed to provoke comparison. She returned to social media with a healthier perspective and a renewed sense of self-worth. Perfectionism. Perfectionism is one of the most insidious enemies of confidence. On the surface, it looks like a positive trait. Who does not want to do their best? But perfectionism is not about doing your best. It is about being perfect, which is impossible. Perfectionists set impossibly high standards and then berate themselves for failing to meet them. They procrastinate because they are afraid of not doing something perfectly. They avoid challenges because challenges involve the possibility of failure. They cannot enjoy their successes because they immediately focus on what could have been better. Life example: Robert, a talented writer, had not published a single piece in 3 years despite writing regularly. His stories were stored on his computer, untouched, because he could never get them to the standard he demanded. He would write a draft, read it, find flaws, and start over. Each revision revealed new imperfections, leading to endless cycles of rewriting. Robert's perfectionism was rooted in a fear of rejection. He believed that if his work was not perfect, it would be criticized and dismissed. Rather than risk that pain, he kept his work private, where it could not be judged. The breakthrough came when a writing mentor told Robert, "You cannot edit a blank page. The only writing that can be improved is writing that exists. You need to finish something imperfect before you can make it better." Robert committed to completing one story per month, regardless of quality. The first few months were painful. He hated submitting imperfect work, but gradually, he began to receive positive feedback. His confidence in his writing grew, and the perfectionism loosened its grip. Within a year, he had published 3 stories in literary magazines. The path forward, understanding why you lost your confidence, is not about assigning blame. It is about identifying the specific patterns and beliefs that are holding you back so that you can address them directly. The next section of this book will give you the tools to do exactly that. Part 2, the Inner Work chapter. For rewriting your self-story. Every person carries a story about who they are. This story is not the objective truth about you. It is a narrative you have constructed based on your experiences, the messages you received from others, and the meanings you assign to those messages. The story shapes your beliefs about yourself, which shape your behavior, which shapes your outcomes, which reinforces the story. If your self-story includes sentences like "I am not good enough," "I always fail," "I am not attractive," or "I do not deserve success," then you are carrying a story that undermines your confidence. The good news is that stories can be rewritten. Understanding your current story. Before you can rewrite your self-story, you need to understand what it is. Your self-story is made up of core beliefs, deeply held convictions about yourself that operate below the surface of conscious awareness. These beliefs were usually formed in childhood and have been reinforced by decades of selective attention and confirmation bias. To identify your core beliefs, pay attention to the narratives that run through your mind when something goes wrong. If you make a mistake at work and think "I always mess things up," the core belief is "I am incompetent." If someone rejects you and you think "no one could ever love me," the core belief is "I am unlovable." Life example: Karen, a marketing executive, noticed that she consistently sabotaged her own career success. Every time she was on the verge of a promotion or a major achievement, she would do something to undermine it, miss a deadline, make a careless error, or withdraw from the opportunity. When Karen examined her self-story, she discovered a core belief that had been planted by her mother: "You have always been the smart one, not the pretty one." This message, repeated throughout her childhood, had created a belief that her value was intellectual, not personal. Karen believed that people could admire her mind but never truly love her. This belief manifested in her career as a fear of being truly seen. She kept people at a distance, presenting her intelligence rather than her whole self. When intimacy, whether professional or personal, threatened to cross that boundary, she retreated. Once Karen identified this core belief, she could begin to challenge it. She asked herself, "Is it true that people can only admire my mind? Is it true that I am not worthy of being loved as a whole person?" The answers, when she was honest, were clearly no. Her mother's message had been a reflection of her mother's own issues, not a statement about Karen's worth. Rewriting the story. Rewriting your self-story is not about positive affirmations or pretending that negative experiences did not happen. It is about creating a more accurate, more complete, and more compassionate narrative. Step 1. Identify the old story. Write down the core beliefs that have been driving your behavior. Be specific. Not just "I am not confident," but "I believe I am not smart enough to succeed in my career. I believe I am not attractive enough to be loved," or "I believe I am too weak to stand up for myself." Step 2. Examine the evidence. For each belief, list the evidence that supports it and the evidence that contradicts it. You will typically find that the supporting evidence is a small fraction of your total experience, but it feels dominant because of the negativity bias. Step 3. Find alternative explanations. For each piece of evidence that seems to support your negative belief, consider alternative interpretations. If you failed at something, it might mean you are incompetent, or it might mean you tried something difficult, learned from the experience, and are now better prepared for the next attempt. Step 4. Construct a new narrative. Write a new story about yourself that incorporates the challenges you have faced, but does not define you by them. This new story should acknowledge your weaknesses while also recognizing your strengths, your growth, and your resilience. Life example. After her breakthrough, Karen wrote a new self-story. The old story was, I am only valuable for my intelligence and I am not worthy of being loved as a whole person. The new story was, I am a complex, intelligent, caring person who has been hurt and has developed protective walls. Those walls served a purpose, but they are no longer necessary. I am capable of being both smart and lovable, and I deserve relationships that value all of who I am. This new story was not easy to adopt. The old story had been reinforced for decades, and it fought back. There were many moments when Karen slipped into the old narrative, especially under stress. But each time she caught herself and gently redirected to the new story became a little stronger and the old story became a little weaker. The power of identity shifts. The most powerful changes in confidence come not from changing what you do, but from changing who you believe you are. When you shift your identity, your behavior follows naturally. This is why New Year's resolutions so often fail. They focus on behavior change without identity change. I will go to the gym more does not work, because it conflicts with the underlying identity of I am not a gym person, but I am becoming a person who values physical health works because it shifts the identity first, and the behavior follows. To shift your identity, you need to change the story you tell yourself about who you are. Instead of I am anxious, try I am someone who sometimes feels anxious but is learning to manage it. Instead of I am a failure, try I am someone who has experienced setbacks and is growing from them. This is not semantic trickery. It is a fundamental reorientation of how you relate to yourself. When you change the story, you change the beliefs. When you change the beliefs, you change the behavior. When you change the behavior, you change the outcomes. And when the outcomes change, the new story becomes easier to believe. Life example. Mark, a recovering alcoholic, had been sober for 3 years but still thought of himself as an alcoholic. His identity was defined by his addiction, which meant that every day was a battle against his true nature. Then Mark's sponsor introduced him to a new way of thinking. You are not an alcoholic who is trying not to drink. You are a healthy person who sometimes craves alcohol. The difference matters because the first story makes sobriety a constant struggle, while the second story makes sobriety an expression of who you are. Mark adopted this new identity. Instead of saying I am an alcoholic in recovery, he began saying I am a person who has chosen health. This subtle shift changed his relationship with his cravings. Instead of feeling like a recovering addict fighting against his nature, he felt like a healthy person making a choice that aligned with his values. The cravings did not disappear, but they lost their power to define him. Chapter 5. Mastering your inner critic inside your mind. There is a voice that comments on everything you do. It tells you that you are not good enough, that you made a mistake, that people are judging you, that you will fail. This voice is your inner critic, and it is one of the greatest obstacles to confidence. Understanding the inner critic. Your inner critic is not your enemy. It is a survival mechanism that has gone haywire. The inner critic developed to protect you from social rejection. In our evolutionary past, being excluded from the group meant death. The inner critic's job was to keep you in line with social norms, to prevent you from doing things that might lead to rejection. The problem is that the inner critic does not know the difference between a genuine threat and a minor social misstep. It reacts to a mistake at work with the same intensity it would react to being banished from the tribe. And it does not stop when the threat has passed. It replays the mistake over and over, ruminating on it, amplifying it, and using it as evidence of your fundamental inadequacy. The inner critic's favorite tactics. Your inner critic has a repertoire of tactics it uses to undermine your confidence. Recognizing these tactics is the first step to disarming them. All or nothing thinking. The inner critic sees everything in extremes. You either succeed perfectly or you are a complete failure. There is no middle ground. A single mistake at work means you are terrible at your job. One awkward social interaction means you are socially incompetent. Overgeneralization. The inner critic takes a single negative event and applies it universally. You failed one exam, so you are stupid. One person rejected you, so no one will ever love you. You made one mistake at work, so you will be fired. Mind reading. The inner critic claims to know what other people are thinking, and it always assumes the worst. That person looked at you funny. They must think you are stupid. Your boss was quiet in the meeting. She must be unhappy with your performance. Catastrophizing. The inner critic blows everything out of proportion. A minor setback becomes a major disaster. A small criticism becomes evidence that your career is over. A single rejection becomes proof that you will be alone forever. Discounting the positive. When good things happen, the inner critic dismisses them. You got a promotion? It was just luck. Someone complimented you? They were just being nice. You achieved a goal? Anyone could have done that. Life example. Tom, an aspiring novelist, had been working on his first book for 2 years. He was making progress, but the inner critic was relentless. Every time he sat down to write, the voice attacked. This is garbage. No one will want to read this. You are wasting your time. You are not a real writer. Tom tried to silence the voice through willpower, but it only made things worse. The more he fought the inner critic, louder it became. He began to dread sitting down to write, and his progress slowed to a crawl. Then Tom learned a different approach. Instead of fighting the inner critic, he learned to observe it. He named his inner critic Gerald, which immediately created some distance between himself and the voice. Instead of thinking I am garbage, he thought Gerald is telling me I am garbage. This subtle shift in perspective allowed him to observe the voice without believing it. Tom also learned to respond to Gerald with facts rather than emotions. When Gerald said this is garbage, Tom responded with I have written 60,000 words and my writing group has given me positive feedback. When Gerald said no one will read this, Tom responded with I do not know that. I have not finished yet. Over time, Gerald did not disappear, but he lost his authority. Tom learned to acknowledge the voice without obeying it. He continued writing despite the criticism, and within a year, he completed his manuscript. The inner critic had not gone away. Tom had simply stopped letting it make his decisions. Techniques for managing the inner critic. There are several evidence-based techniques for managing your inner critic. Cognitive restructuring. This involves identifying negative thoughts, examining the evidence for and against them, and replacing them with more balanced alternatives. It is not about positive thinking, it is about accurate thinking. Thought diffusion. This technique, borrowed from acceptance and commitment therapy, involves creating distance from your thoughts. Instead of thinking I'm a failure, you think I am having the thought that I am a failure. This subtle shift reminds you that thoughts are not facts. Self-compassion, as we will explore in the next chapter. Treating yourself with kindness rather than criticism is one of the most effective ways to quiet the inner critic. The stop technique. When your inner critic is running rampant, use the stop technique. Stop what you are doing. Take a breath. Observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Proceed with awareness and intention. Mindfulness. Regular mindfulness practice strengthens your ability to observe your thoughts without getting caught up in them. The more you practice, the better you become at recognizing the inner critic's voice and choosing not to engage with it. Life example. Sandra, a physician, struggled with a particularly harsh inner critic that attacked her medical judgment. After making a diagnostic error early in her career, the voice had become relentless. You are going to hurt someone. You are not smart enough to be a doctor. Everyone will find out you are a fraud. Sandra's inner critic was not just a nuisance, it was affecting her patient care. She spent so much time second-guessing her decisions that she was slower and less decisive than she needed to be. She sought help from a therapist who specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy. Through cognitive restructuring, Sandra learned to challenge the inner critic's claims. She examined the evidence. She had treated thousands of patients successfully, received excellent evaluations from colleagues and patients alike, and the single diagnostic error had been a learning experience that made her a better physician. Through mindfulness, Sandra learned to observe the critic's voice without engaging with it. She practiced noting, there is the fear thought, there is the fraud thought, there is the judgment thought. Each time she noted a thought, it lost a little of its power. Within 6 months, Sandra's inner critic had not disappeared, but it no longer dominated her professional life. She made decisions more quickly, trusted her judgment more fully, and experienced less anxiety about her performance. The critic was still there, but it was no longer in the driver's seat. Chapter 6: The Power of Self-Compassion. Self-compassion is the practice of treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and patience you would offer a good friend. It is the antidote to self-criticism, and one of the most powerful tools for building lasting confidence. What self-compassion is not. Self-compassion is often confused with self-pity, self-indulgence, or making excuses. It is none of these things. Self-pity says, poor me. Self-compassion says, this is hard, and I am not alone in finding it hard. Self-indulgence says, I deserve to do whatever feels good. Self-compassion says, I deserve to treat myself with kindness, even when I have made mistakes. Making excuses says, it is not my fault. Self-compassion says, it may be my fault, but I can forgive myself and learn from it. Dr. Kristen Neff, the leading researcher on self-compassion, identifies 3 components: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-kindness means being warm and understanding toward yourself rather than harshly critical. When you make a mistake, you comfort yourself rather than attacking yourself. Common humanity means recognizing that suffering and imperfection are part of the shared human experience. You are not alone in your struggles. Everyone makes mistakes, everyone feels inadequate sometimes, and everyone experiences failure. Mindfulness means holding your painful thoughts and feelings in balanced awareness rather than over-identifying with them. You acknowledge the pain without drowning in it. The science of self-compassion. Research has consistently shown that self-compassion is associated with greater emotional resilience, lower anxiety and depression, increased motivation, and, crucially, greater confidence. This surprises many people who assume that self-criticism is necessary for improvement. They believe that if they are not hard on themselves, they will become lazy or complacent. The research shows the opposite. Self-compassion actually increases motivation because it removes the fear of failure. When you know that you will treat yourself kindly if you fail, you are more willing to take risks. Self-compassion also improves performance. Studies have shown that people who practice self-compassion after a failure perform better on subsequent tasks than those who engage in self-criticism. This is because self-compassion reduces the anxiety and rumination that interfere with performance. Life example: Alex, a competitive swimmer, had always used self-criticism as a motivator. When he performed poorly, he berated himself harshly, believing that the criticism would drive him to improve. And it did work, to a point. He was a strong swimmer, but he had plateaued at a level below his potential. His coach noticed that Alex swam worse in high-pressure situations, competitions, time trials, important meets. In practice, when the stakes were low, Alex was relaxed and performed well. Under pressure, he tightened up, overthought his technique, and underperformed. The coach introduced Alex to self-compassion techniques. After a poor performance, instead of berating himself, Alex was instructed to say 3 things to himself. This is a moment of suffering mindfulness. Suffering is part of being an athlete. Common humanity. May I be kind to myself. Self-kindness. Alex was skeptical, but he committed to the practice. Over several months, something remarkable happened. His performance in high-pressure situations improved dramatically. When he stopped fearing the consequences of failure, he was free to perform at his best. The self-criticism had been creating the very anxiety it was supposed to prevent. Within a year, Alex had dropped 3 seconds from his best time and qualified for the national championships. His coach told him, You did not get faster by being harder on yourself. You got faster by being kinder to yourself. Practical self-compassion exercises. Self-compassion is a practice, not a concept. Here are specific exercises you can use to develop it. The self-compassion break. When you are going through a difficult moment, pause and do the following. Place your hand on your heart. Acknowledge that you are suffering. Remind yourself that suffering is part of the human experience and offer yourself words of kindness and support. Writing a compassionate letter. Write a letter to yourself from the perspective of a loving friend. What would a friend say to you about your current struggles? How would they view your mistakes? What would they want you to know? The compassionate body scan. Sit quietly and bring attention to each part of your body. If you notice tension or discomfort, breathe into that area and offer it compassion. Imagine sending warmth and kindness to the parts of your body that are holding stress. Loving kindness meditation. This meditation involves silently repeating phrases of goodwill toward yourself and others. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. Over time, this practice rewires the brain to default to compassion rather than criticism. Life example. Rachel, a single mother working 2 jobs, was exhausted, overwhelmed, and constantly criticized herself for not being a good enough mother. She did not have time for elaborate self-care routines, but she began practicing the self-compassion break whenever she noticed the self-criticism escalating. When she missed her daughter's school event because of work, instead of spiraling into guilt and self-hatred, she said to herself, "This is hard." Many working parents face the same challenge. I am doing my best, and my best is enough. This did not eliminate the guilt entirely, but it prevented the guilt from becoming toxic. Rachel was able to acknowledge her pain without letting it consume her. She remained present and functional for her daughter instead of collapsing into self-criticism that would have made her less available, not more. Over time, Rachel noticed that her self-compassion practice was improving her relationship with her daughter. When she was kinder to herself, she was kinder to her daughter. When she stopped demanding perfection from herself, she stopped demanding perfection from her daughter. The self-compassion rippled outward, creating a more loving and supportive home environment. Self-compassion and confidence. Self-compassion and confidence are deeply connected. When you are compassionate toward yourself, you create a safe internal environment in which to take risks. You know that if you fail, you will treat yourself with kindness rather than cruelty. This safety allows you to step outside your comfort zone, try new things, and push your limits. Without self-compassion, every risk feels existential. If failure means self-annihilation, you cannot afford to fail. If a mistake means you are worthless, you cannot afford to make mistakes. This creates a prison of avoidance that keeps you trapped in a narrow, fear-driven life. With self-compassion, failure is painful but not catastrophic. Mistakes are disappointing but not devastating. You can take risks because you know that even if things go wrong, you will treat yourself with the kindness and understanding you deserve. And that freedom, the freedom to fail without self-destruction, is the foundation of genuine, lasting confidence. Part 3 Building Confidence Through Action. Chapter 7 The Confidence Action Loop. The most important principle in this entire book is this: confidence comes from action, not from waiting until you feel ready. If you wait until you feel confident before taking action, you will wait forever. Confidence is the result of action, not the prerequisite for it. Understanding the loop. The confidence action loop works like this: you take an action, even though you are afraid. The action produces a result: success, partial success, or failure. You survive the result. Your brain registers that the feared outcome did not destroy you. Your confidence increases slightly. This increased confidence makes you more willing to take the next action. The key insight is that the first step must come before the feeling of confidence. You cannot feel confident about something you have never done. You can only build confidence by doing it. This means that the initial action will always feel uncomfortable, scary, or wrong. That discomfort is not a sign that you are making a mistake. It is a sign that you are growing. Life example. Priya, A recent college graduate wanted to start a business but felt paralyzed by self-doubt. She did not know where to begin, did not feel qualified, and was convinced that she would fail. She spent months researching business plans, watching entrepreneurial videos, and reading books about startups, all without taking a single concrete action. Then Priya attended a seminar where a successful entrepreneur said something that changed her perspective. You do not need to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. Priya decided to take one small action. She set up a simple website for her business idea. It was not perfect. It was not complete. But it was real, something she had created and put into the world. The act of creating the website, imperfect as it was, gave her a surge of confidence. She had done something. Encouraged by this first step, Priya took another. She told 5 friends about her business idea and asked for feedback. The feedback was mostly positive, which further boosted her confidence. She then took another step. She created a social media account and posted about her business. Each step was small. Each step was uncomfortable. But each step built confidence that made the next step possible. Within 6 months, Priya had a functioning website, a social media following, and her first paying customer. The business was far from successful, but Priya had built something more valuable than a revenue stream. She had built the confidence to take action despite uncertainty. The micro-action strategy. If the idea of taking a big step feels overwhelming, break it down into micro-actions. A micro-action is so small that it feels almost ridiculous to call it an action. It is the kind of thing you could do in 2 minutes or less. Want to start exercising? Do 1 push-up. Want to write a book? Write 1 sentence. Want to start a conversation with a stranger? Make eye contact and smile. Micro-actions work because they bypass the fear response. The amygdala does not activate for threats that are this small. You do 1 push-up and your brain registers. That was easy. I can do that again. You write 1 sentence and your brain registers. That was not so bad. I can write another. Over time, the micro-actions accumulate into significant progress. And the confidence that comes from each micro-action compounds, making larger and larger actions feel manageable. Life example. Michael, who had been unemployed for 6 months, was overwhelmed by the job search process. The thought of writing a resume, applying for jobs, and attending interviews felt paralyzing. His confidence had eroded to the point where he did not believe he was qualified for any position. Michael's therapist suggested the micro-action approach. Instead of trying to write a complete resume, she asked him to write 1 bullet point describing 1 accomplishment from his previous job. That was it for the day. 1 bullet point. The next day, she asked him to write 1 more bullet point. The day after that, 1 more. Within 2 weeks, Michael had a complete resume, not because he had mustered the motivation to write it all at once, but because he had accumulated small actions that added up. The confidence Michael gained from completing his resume gave him the courage to start applying for jobs. He used the same micro-action approach, 1 application per day. Some days, he only managed to fill out part of an application, and that was okay. The point was not perfection, it was action. Within 3 months, Michael had applied to 40 positions and received 5 interview invitations. He was offered a position at a company that was a good fit for his skills. The job search had taken longer than he hoped, but the micro-action approach had kept him moving when the alternative was paralysis. The 100-day challenge. 1 powerful way to build confidence is to commit to doing something, anything, for 100 consecutive days. The activity does not matter as much as the commitment. It could be writing, exercising, meditating, learning a language, or practicing a skill. The point of the 100-day challenge is not to master the activity. It is to prove to yourself that you can follow through on a commitment. Many people with low confidence have a history of starting things and not finishing them. The 100-day challenge breaks that pattern. Life example. Nicole, a freelance graphic designer, had a history of abandoning projects. She would start with enthusiasm, encounter difficulty, and move on to something else. Her portfolio was full of half-finished designs, her client list was thin, and her confidence was low. Nicole committed to a 100-day design challenge. She would create one design per day and post it to her social media account. The design did not have to be client work, it just had to be completed. The first 30 days were difficult. Nicole had forced herself to complete designs she was not happy with. She resisted the urge to start over, to abandon a design halfway through, to skip a day because she was not feeling inspired. But something shifted around day 40. Nicole began to notice that her daily practice was improving her skills. She was experimenting with styles she never would have tried if she had been working on a single, high-stakes project. She was developing a body of work that demonstrated her range and versatility. By day 100, Nicole had a portfolio of 100 designs, a significant increase in social media followers, and several new client inquiries. More importantly, she had proven to herself that she could commit to a project and see it through. That confidence carried over into every aspect of her professional life. Chapter 8: Conquering Fear Step by Step. Fear is the primary obstacle to confidence. It is the voice that says, do not try, do not speak, do not risk, do not fail. Understanding fear and learning to work with it is essential for building confidence. The nature of fear. Fear is a survival mechanism. It is your brain's way of protecting you from danger. When you encounter a threat, a wild animal, a cliff edge, a hostile stranger, fear triggers a cascade of physiological responses: increased heart rate, rapid breathing, muscle tension, and heightened alertness. These responses prepare you to fight or flee. The problem is that your brain does not distinguish between genuine physical threats and psychological threats. The same fear response that activates when you see a snake also activates when your boss calls you into their office. The fear of social rejection triggers the same neural pathways as the fear of physical harm. Understanding this does not make fear go away, but it does allow you to contextualize it. When you feel fear before a public speech, you can remind yourself, this is my brain treating a social situation like a physical threat. The fear is real, but the danger is not. I can choose to act despite the fear. The fear-confidence spectrum. Think of fear and confidence as two ends of a spectrum. When fear is high, confidence is low. When confidence is high, fear is low. The goal is not to eliminate fear entirely but to shift the balance so that confidence outweighs fear. This shift happens through exposure. When you repeatedly expose yourself to something that frightens you, your brain gradually learns that the situation is not actually dangerous. The fear response diminishes and confidence increases. This is called habituation, and it is the basis of all effective fear confrontation strategies. The exposure hierarchy. One of the most effective tools for conquering fear is the exposure hierarchy. This is a ranked list of feared situations, ordered from least frightening to most frightening. You start with the least frightening situation and work your way up, spending enough time at each level to become comfortable before moving to the next. Life example: Daniel had a fear of heights that prevented him from enjoying outdoor activities with his friends. He could not hike on mountain trails, cross bridges, or even stand on a balcony above the 3rd floor. Daniel created an exposure hierarchy for his fear of heights. 1. Looking at pictures of mountains and high places. 2. Watching videos of people at high places. 3. Standing on a chair. 4. Standing on a stepladder. 5. Looking out a 3rd floor window. 6. Standing on a balcony. 7. Walking across a low bridge. 8. Hiking on a trail with moderate elevation. 9. Hiking to a viewpoint with a significant drop. Daniel spent 2 weeks at each level, practicing until his anxiety decreased significantly. Some levels were easier than others. The stepladder was not particularly frightening, but the balcony was terrifying. He spent 3 weeks on that level before he felt ready to move on. After 6 months, Daniel was able to hike on mountain trails and enjoy the views that had previously been inaccessible to him. His fear had not disappeared entirely. He still felt a twinge of anxiety at extreme heights, but it no longer controlled his life. He had built enough confidence to manage the fear and enjoy the experiences he valued. Social fears and confidence. Social fears are among the most common and most debilitating fears people experience. Fear of public speaking, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of confrontation. These fears prevent millions of people from living fully. The key to conquering social fears is to recognize that most social fears are based on distorted thinking. The spotlight effect, the belief that others are paying more attention to you than they are, mind reading, the belief that you know what others are thinking, and catastrophizing, the belief that social failure will be catastrophic, all contribute to social anxiety. Life example: Emma, a software developer, was terrified of networking events. She avoided them entirely, which limited her career growth because so much of the tech industry operates through personal connections. Emma's therapist helped her identify the specific fears underlying her avoidance. Emma feared that she would have nothing interesting to say, that people would judge her for being awkward, and that she would be ignored or rejected. They created an exposure hierarchy for social situations. 1. Making eye contact and smiling at a stranger. 2. Asking a cashier how their day is going. 3. Making small talk with a colleague in the break room. 4. Attending a work meeting and speaking once. 5. Attending a small networking event with a supportive friend. 6. Attending a networking event alone. 7. Initiating a conversation with a stranger at a networking event. 8. Following up with a new contact after a networking event. Emma worked through the hierarchy over 4 months. The early steps were relatively easy, but the later steps were challenging. Attending a networking event alone was terrifying, as she left after only 30 minutes, but she went back the next month and stayed for an hour. By the 6th event, she was staying for the full duration and initiating multiple conversations. Emma's career benefited enormously from her increased social confidence. She made connections that led to job opportunities, learned about industry trends through casual conversations, and built a professional network that supported her growth. The fear had not disappeared, but she had learned to act despite it. The role of courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to act in the presence of fear. Courage is not a personality trait. It is a choice. Every time you choose to face a fear rather than avoid it, you are being courageous. The beautiful thing about courage is that it begets more courage. Each courageous act builds the confidence to take the next one. Over time, what once seemed impossible becomes merely difficult, and what was difficult becomes routine. Life example: Rosa Parks, whose refusal to give up her bus seat in 1955 sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, was not fearless. She was afraid of the consequences of her actions: arrest, violence, the loss of her job. But she chose to act despite her fear, because she believed the cause was more important than her comfort. Rosa Parks's courage was not a single moment but a lifetime of practice. She had been involved in civil rights activism for years before her famous bus ride. Each small act of courage, attending meetings, signing petitions, speaking up against injustice, had built the confidence to take the larger step when the moment arrived. You do not need to spark a civil rights movement to be courageous. You just need to face the fears that are preventing you from living the life you want. That is courage. And it is available to you right now, in this moment, regardless of how afraid you feel. Chapter 9: The Art of Showing Up. Showing up means being present, being visible, and being willing to be seen. It is the opposite of hiding, avoiding, and withdrawing. Showing up is the fundamental act of confidence, and it is a practice that can be cultivated. Why showing up matters. When you show up, you communicate to yourself and others that you matter, that your presence has value, and that you are willing to be seen. When you hide, you communicate the opposite: that you are not worthy of being seen, that your presence is a burden, and that the safest course is invisibility. Showing up is not about being the center of attention. It is about participating in life rather than observing from the sidelines. It is about raising your hand in meetings, attending social events, volunteering for projects, and engaging with the world rather than retreating from it. The barriers to showing up. Several internal barriers prevent people from showing up. Fear of judgment. You worry about what others will think of you if they see the real you. This fear keeps you hidden, playing small and avoiding situations where you might be evaluated. Perfectionism. You believe that unless you can show up perfectly, you should not show up at all. This prevents you from participating in anything where you might make mistakes or appear less than ideal. Low self-worth. You do not believe that your presence adds value, so you stay away. Why bother showing up if no one will notice or care? Past experiences. You have shown up before and been hurt, rejected, or criticized. The memory of those experiences makes you reluctant to expose yourself again. The practice of showing up. Showing up is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. Each day presents opportunities to show up, and each time you choose to show up rather than hide, you build confidence. Start small. You do not need to give a TED talk or throw a dinner party to start showing up. You can start by raising your hand in a meeting, introducing yourself to a neighbor, or posting something on social media. The size of the action matters less than the act of doing it. Life example. Kevin, a quiet accountant, had spent his career avoiding visibility. He did his work well but never volunteered for presentations, never spoke up in meetings, and never socialized with colleagues outside of work. He was invisible, and he liked it that way, or so he told himself. Then Kevin's company underwent a reorganization, and his department was merged with another. Suddenly, Kevin was surrounded by new colleagues who did not know his work. His invisibility, which had been comfortable when everyone knew him, became a liability when no one knew him. Kevin realized that if he wanted to keep his job and advance in the new structure, he needed to show up. He started with small actions, saying good morning to his new colleagues, asking questions in team meetings, and attending one social event per month. Each act of showing up was uncomfortable, but Kevin persisted. He discovered that the anticipation was always worse than the reality. The colleagues he was afraid to approach turned out to be friendly and welcoming. The questions he was afraid to ask turned out to be appreciated by others who had the same questions. The social events he was afraid to attend turned out to be enjoyable. Over the course of a year, Kevin went from being invisible to being known. He built relationships with his new colleagues, established a reputation for competence and reliability, and was even invited to lead a project. The act of showing up had transformed his professional life. Showing up in relationships. Showing up in relationships means being emotionally present and available. It means sharing your thoughts and feelings, listening to others with genuine interest, and being willing to be vulnerable. Many people avoid showing up in relationships because it feels risky. Sharing your true self means risking rejection. Listening deeply means being affected by another person's pain. Being vulnerable means exposing your weaknesses. But relationships cannot deepen without showing up. If you keep your true self hidden, the other person can only connect with the mask you present. True intimacy, the experience of being truly known and loved, requires the courage to show up as you really are. Life example. Thomas had been married for 10 years but felt disconnected from his wife, Lisa. They coexisted amicably but without the depth of connection they had once shared. Thomas attributed this to the natural evolution of long-term relationships. Passion fades, familiarity breeds comfort, and depth gives way to routine. But Thomas's therapist suggested a different explanation. Thomas had stopped showing up in the relationship. He shared surface-level details about his day but avoided talking about his fears, his dreams, his doubts, and his feelings. He listened to Lisa's conversations but did not engage with them deeply. He was present physically but absent emotionally. Thomas began to practice showing up. He started sharing one vulnerable thing with Lisa each day: a fear, a hope, a struggle, a memory. He asked her questions about her inner life and truly listened to the answers. He initiated difficult conversations about their relationship rather than avoiding them. The results were not immediate. Lisa was initially surprised by the change and somewhat suspicious of it. But as Thomas continued to show up consistently, the relationship began to transform. They rediscovered the emotional intimacy they had lost. They became partners again rather than roommates. The showing up was scary, but the alternative, a life of emotional disconnection, was scarier. Part 4, Confidence in Relationships, Chapter 10, Speaking with Authority. How you speak directly affects how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Speaking with authority is not about being loud, aggressive, or domineering. It is about being clear, direct, and grounded in your own truth. The elements of authoritative speech. Authoritative speech has several key characteristics. Clarity. You say what you mean without hedging, apologizing, or diluting your message. Instead of "I think maybe we should consider possibly doing X," you say "I believe we should do X." Directness. You address the topic at hand without deflecting, sidetracking, or burying your point in excessive context. You get to the point. Calmness. You maintain a steady, even tone even when discussing difficult topics. You do not raise your voice, speed up, or become tense. Ownership. You speak in the first person and take responsibility for your statements. Instead of "people say that," you say "I believe that." Instead of "it seems like," you say "I have observed that." Life example. Michelle, a project manager, noticed that her ideas were consistently overlooked in meetings while similar ideas from male colleagues were taken seriously. She had assumed this was because her ideas were inferior, but a mentor helped her see that the issue was not content but delivery. Michelle's speech patterns undermined her authority. She prefaced her ideas with disclaimers like "this might not be a good idea," "before I am not sure about this." But she ended her statements with upspeak, making declarative sentences sound like questions. She spoke quickly, as if she was trying to minimize the time her ideas occupied. Michelle practiced speaking with authority. She removed the disclaimers from her statements. She ended her sentences with a downward inflection, signaling certainty. She slowed her speech rate, allowing each word to carry weight. She paused before answering questions, signaling that she was thinking carefully rather than reacting impulsively. The change was noticed immediately. Colleagues began taking her ideas more seriously. Her manager commented that she seemed more confident and capable. Michelle realized that the content of her ideas had not changed, only the delivery. But the delivery made all the difference. The power of pause. One of the most underrated tools of authoritative speech is the pause. When you pause before answering a question, you signal that you are giving the question genuine consideration. When you pause after making a statement, you allow the statement to sink in. When you pause during a difficult conversation, you create space for reflection rather than reaction. Most people rush to fill silence because it feels uncomfortable, but silence is powerful. It communicates confidence, thoughtfulness, and self-assurance. People who are comfortable with silence are perceived as more competent and more in control. Life example. A senior executive named Robert was known for his commanding presence in meetings. When asked a difficult question, he would pause, sometimes for 5 or 10 seconds, before answering. This silence made his colleagues uncomfortable, and they often rushed to fill it, sometimes revealing information they had not intended to share. When Robert did answer, his response was measured, thoughtful, and authoritative. The pause had given him time to formulate his answer carefully rather than reacting impulsively. It had also established his dominance in the conversation. He was willing to tolerate the discomfort of silence, while others were not. Robert's use of pause was not a manipulative tactic. It was a genuine expression of his thoughtfulness. But it had the effect of increasing his perceived authority and influence. People listened to Robert because he spoke deliberately and with intention. Handling disagreement. Speaking with authority does not mean always being right or always getting your way. It means being able to express your perspective clearly and hold your ground when challenged, while remaining open to other viewpoints. When someone disagrees with you, the confident response is not to become defensive, dismissive, or aggressive. It is to listen to their perspective, acknowledge their point, and then either update your position if they have a valid point or restate your position with clarity and respect. Life example. A teacher named Sarah was challenged by a parent who disagreed with her grading policy. The parent was angry and confrontational, raising his voice and making personal attacks. Sarah responded with calm authority. She acknowledged the parent's frustration. I can see that you are upset about this, and I understand that you want what is best for your child. She then explained her grading policy clearly and directly, without being defensive or apologetic. When the parent made a point she agreed with, she acknowledged it. You raise a valid concern about the rubric, and I will consider adjusting it. When the parent made a point she disagreed with, she held her ground respectfully. I understand your perspective, but I believe the current policy is fair and I will maintain it. The parent left the meeting feeling heard, even though he did not get everything he wanted. Sarah's colleagues, who witnessed the exchange, were impressed by her composure and authority. She had not been aggressive or passive. She had been assertive, which is the confident middle ground between the two. Chapter 11. Setting boundaries without guilt. Boundaries are the limits you set to protect your time, energy, and well-being. Setting boundaries is one of the most important expressions of confidence because it communicates that you value yourself enough to protect your needs. Why boundaries matter. Without boundaries, you become a doormat. People take advantage of your time, your energy, and your resources because you have not communicated that there are limits. You say yes when you mean no, and you pay the price in exhaustion, resentment, and lost self-respect. Boundaries are not selfish. They are essential for healthy relationships. When you set clear boundaries, you create a framework for mutual respect. The other person knows where they stand, and you know where you stand. This clarity prevents the misunderstandings and resentments that erode relationships over time. The guilt trap. Many people avoid setting boundaries because they feel guilty about saying no. This guilt is usually rooted in one of two beliefs: that saying no makes you a bad person, or that other people's needs are more important than your own. Both of these beliefs are false. Saying no to something you do not want to do does not make you a bad person. It makes you honest. Other people's needs are important, but so are yours. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and sacrificing your own well-being for others ultimately serves no one. Life example. Amy, a people-pleaser, had never said no to anyone in her life. She volunteered for every committee, attended every social event, and helped every friend who asked, even when she was exhausted, overwhelmed, and running on empty. The result was that Amy was exhausted, resentful, and deeply unhappy. She felt taken for granted, but could not bring herself to set boundaries because she was afraid of disappointing people. Amy started small. She said no to one request per week, a small, low-stakes refusal that she could manage without overwhelming guilt. The first time she said no, the person she refused simply said okay and moved on. Amy was stunned. She had expected anger, disappointment, or punishment. Instead, she received acceptance. Each time Amy said no, it became easier. She began to realize that most people do not react badly to reasonable boundaries. The ones who did react badly were the ones who had been benefiting from her lack of boundaries, and their reaction was not about Amy's worth, but about their loss of access to her unlimited availability. Over 6 months, Amy transformed her relationships. She was no longer resentful because she was no longer doing things she did not want to do. She was no longer exhausted because she was protecting her time and energy. And she was no longer taken for granted because she had demonstrated that her time and energy had value. How to set boundaries effectively. Setting boundaries is a skill, and like any skill, it requires practice. Be clear and direct. Do not hint, suggest, or imply. Say what you mean. I cannot do that this weekend. I need some time alone tonight. I am not comfortable with that. Be consistent. If you set a boundary and then violate it, you teach people that your boundaries are negotiable. Hold firm, even when it is uncomfortable. Be compassionate. You can be firm without being harsh. I understand this is important to you, and I am not able to help with it right now. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I need to decline. Accept the discomfort. Setting boundaries will feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you are not used to it. The discomfort is temporary, but the benefits are lasting. Life example. Marcus, a manager, had difficulty setting boundaries with his employees. He wanted to be liked and feared that saying no would damage his relationships with his team. As a result, he was available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, responding to emails at midnight and accepting every request for additional help. Marcus was burning out. His work quality was declining. His relationships with his family were suffering, and he was becoming resentful of the very employees he was trying to please. Marcus implemented a new policy. He checked email 3 times a day at set times, and he was available for non-emergency requests during business hours only. He communicated this clearly and directly to his team, explaining that the change would help him be more focused and effective during work hours. Some employees were initially frustrated, but Marcus held firm. Within a month, the team had adjusted. They discovered that most of their questions could wait until the next email check, and the ones that could not were handled through other channels. Marcus was more focused, more productive, and more present, both at work and at home. The boundaries had not damaged his relationships. They had improved them by making him a more effective and less resentful leader. Chapter 12. Confidence in love and friendship. Confidence in relationships is fundamentally different from confidence in other areas of life. In romance and friendship, confidence means being willing to be known, to be vulnerable, and to risk rejection, not because you are certain of a positive outcome, but because the connection is worth a risk. The fear of rejection. The fear of rejection is one of the most powerful fears humans experience. It is the fear that the people you care about will not care about you, that the person you love will not love you back, that the friends you need will not want you. This fear is rooted in our evolutionary past. Being rejected by the group meant death for our ancestors. The fear of rejection is so deeply wired into our brains that it can be paralyzing, preventing us from forming the connections we need for a fulfilling life. Confidence in relationships requires accepting the possibility of rejection and choosing to connect anyway. This does not mean being reckless or ignoring red flags. It means being willing to put yourself out there, knowing that sometimes you will be accepted and sometimes you will not, and that both outcomes are survivable. Life example. David had been single for 3 years after a painful breakup. He wanted to date again but was paralyzed by the fear of rejection. He imagined all the ways a first date could go wrong: awkward silences, judgmental looks, the inevitable moment when the other person realized he was not good enough. David's therapist pointed out something he had not considered. David was treating rejection as evidence of his inadequacy rather than as a natural part of the dating process. Not every person you meet will be a match, and that does not mean something is wrong with you. It means you have not found the right person yet. David began dating with a new attitude. Instead of trying to impress every woman he met, he focused on determining whether he was genuinely compatible with them. This shift took the pressure off and allowed him to be more himself. When a date did not lead to a second, David practiced self-compassion. This was not a match, and that is okay. I am still worthy of love. When a date did lead to a second, David allowed himself to enjoy it without catastrophizing about whether it would last. Within a year, David was in a relationship with a woman who appreciated him for who he was. The relationship was not perfect, but it was real and it was built on the foundation of David's willingness to show up and risk rejection. Vulnerability as strength. In relationships, vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. It takes courage to reveal your true self to another person, to share your fears and dreams, to admit that you are not perfect. This vulnerability creates intimacy, which is the foundation of deep connection. Brené Brown, in her research on vulnerability, found that people who are willing to be vulnerable are perceived as more trustworthy, more likable, and more worthy of love. This makes sense, If someone is willing to show you their imperfections, they are signaling that they trust you enough to be seen as they really are. Life example: Jessica and Ryan had been dating for 6 months when Ryan received a devastating medical diagnosis. His first instinct was to withdraw, to protect Jessica from the burden of his illness, to push her away before she could be hurt by his decline. But Ryan chose vulnerability instead. He told Jessica about his diagnosis, his fears, and his uncertainty about the future. He did not pretend to be strong or hide his pain. He allowed himself to be seen in his most vulnerable state. Jessica's response was the opposite of what Ryan feared. She was not repelled by his vulnerability, she was moved by it. She held him while he cried, sat with him in his fear, and committed to walking alongside him through whatever was to come. Their relationship deepened more in that single moment of vulnerability than it had in the previous 6 months of happy dating. Ryan's experience illustrates a fundamental truth about relationships. Intimacy cannot exist without vulnerability. If you keep your true self hidden, you prevent the other person from truly knowing you. And if they cannot truly know you, they cannot truly love you, they can only love the mask you present. Building healthy relationships with confidence. Confident people build healthy relationships because they do not need the relationship to validate their worth. They bring their full selves to the relationship, including their strengths and weaknesses, and they allow the other person to do the same. This does not mean confident people never struggle in relationships. They do, but they approach relationship challenges with the belief that they can handle them, that they deserve to be treated well, and that they can walk away from relationships that are not serving them. Life example: Elena had a pattern of staying in unhealthy relationships long past their expiration date. She stayed with partners who were emotionally unavailable, who criticized her, or who took more than they gave. She stayed because she believed that being in a relationship, any relationship, was better than being alone. Elena therapy helped her understand that her pattern was rooted in a belief that she was not worthy of a healthy relationship. She believed she had to earn love through sacrifice and tolerance, and that demanding to be treated well would drive partners away. As Elena built her confidence, she began to apply new standards to her relationships. She ended a relationship with a partner who consistently dismissed her feelings. She set boundaries with a friend who was always taking and never giving. She started dating someone who treated her with respect and kindness, and she allowed herself to enjoy it rather than waiting for the other shoe to drop. Elena's confidence allowed her to be both open and discerning. She could be vulnerable without being naive, trusting without being blind, and loving without losing herself. This balance between openness and self-protection is the hallmark of confident relationships. Part 5: Confidence in the Professional World. Chapter 13: Career Confidence and Leadership. Professional confidence affects every aspect of your career, from the jobs you apply for to the raises you negotiate to the leadership roles you pursue. Without professional confidence, you will settle for less than you deserve, avoid challenges that could advance your career, and allow others to take credit for your work. The confidence gap. Research has consistently shown that men and women experience a confidence gap in the workplace. Studies by Hewlett-Packard found that men apply for jobs when they meet 60% of the qualifications, while women apply only when they meet 100%. This means that equally qualified women are systematically under-applying for opportunities. This confidence gap affects hiring, promotions, and compensation. People who lack professional confidence are less likely to negotiate their salaries, less likely to advocate for their ideas, and less likely to pursue leadership positions, even when they are perfectly qualified. Life example: Priya, a talented engineer, was offered a position at a tech company with a starting salary of $90,000. She was thrilled but also felt that the offer was below her market value. She had researched similar positions and found that the average salary was $105,000. The confident response would have been to negotiate. But Priya was afraid that negotiating would make her seem greedy or ungrateful. She worried that the company would rescind the offer if she pushed back. She accepted the $90,000 without discussion. 2 years later, Priya discovered that a male colleague with similar qualifications and experience had negotiated his starting salary to $115,000. The difference in their starting salaries compounded over time, resulting in a gap of tens of thousands of dollars in total compensation. Priya learned a valuable lesson. The cost of not negotiating is real and significant. The next time she received a job offer, she negotiated. She was nervous, but she prepared thoroughly, researching market rates, practicing her pitch, and rehearsing with a friend. The negotiation was uncomfortable, but the company met her at $110,000. The discomfort lasted 20 minutes. The financial impact would last her entire career. Negotiation as confidence practice. Salary negotiation is one of the most practical applications of professional confidence. The principles are the same as in any other area. You must be willing to be uncomfortable, you must know your worth, and you must be willing to walk away if necessary. Preparation is key. Before any negotiation, research the market rate for your position, document your accomplishments, and practice your pitch. The more prepared you are, the more confident you will feel. Life example: Marcus, a marketing director, had not received a raise in 2 years despite consistently exceeding his targets. He knew he was underpaid but was afraid to bring it up with his manager. Marcus prepared for the negotiation by documenting his achievements. He had increased department revenue by 30%, managed a team of 12, and led 3 successful product launches. He researched market rates and found that his salary was 20% below the average for someone with his experience and responsibilities. When Marcus requested a meeting with his manager, he came prepared with specific examples of his contributions and data on market compensation. He stated his request clearly. Based on my contributions and market data, I am requesting a salary adjustment to $130,000. His manager was surprised but could not argue with the data. After consulting with HR, the company agreed to a 15% raise, bringing his salary to $120,000. Marcus also negotiated additional vacation days and a professional development budget. The negotiation took 30 minutes. The financial impact would be felt for years. And the confidence Marcus gained from advocating for himself carried over into every aspect of his professional life. Leadership and confidence. Leadership requires confidence in your vision, your decisions, and your ability to guide others. Leaders who lack confidence create organizations that are uncertain, directionless, and fearful. Leaders who are confident create organizations that are focused, motivated, and resilient. Confident leaders make decisions quickly and decisively. They do not agonize over every option or seek consensus on every issue. They gather information, consult with others when appropriate, and then make a call. They are willing to be wrong and to correct course when new information emerges. Confident leaders communicate clearly and directly. They do not hedge, equivocate, or bury their messages in jargon. They say what they mean and mean what they say. Their teams know where they stand and what is expected of them. Confident leaders take responsibility for failures and share credit for successes. They do not blame others when things go wrong, and they do not hoard recognition when things go right. This builds trust and loyalty, which are the foundations of effective leadership. Life example: Lisa, a newly promoted CEO, struggled with imposter syndrome in her new role. Despite her qualifications and track record, she felt like a fraud who had been handed a position she did not deserve. She second-guessed her decisions, avoided making controversial calls, and spent excessive time seeking input from her team on issues that should have been her responsibility. The result was a leadership vacuum. Her team was uncertain about the direction of the company, and decisions were delayed or deferred. Morale was declining because employees craved the clarity and confidence that Lisa was not providing. Lisa recognized what was happening and sought help from an executive coach. The coach helped her identify the imposter syndrome driving her behavior and develop strategies for managing it. The coach pointed out that Lisa's track record of success was not a fluke. It was evidence of genuine competence. Lisa began making decisions more quickly, communicating with greater clarity, and taking ownership of both successes and failures. The change was gradual but significant. Her team responded to her increased confidence with increased engagement. Within a year, the company was performing at a higher level than it had under previous leadership. The lesson for Lisa was not that she needed to become someone different. She needed to trust the person she already was. Her qualifications, her experience, and her abilities were real. The only thing missing was the confidence to own them. Chapter 14: Public Speaking and Social Confidence. Public speaking consistently ranks among the most common fears people experience. Some surveys suggest that people fear public speaking more than death. While this may be an exaggeration, the fear is real and can be debilitating. The roots of speaking anxiety. The fear of public speaking is rooted in the fear of social evaluation. When you speak in front of a group, you are exposed. Everyone is looking at you, judging your words, your appearance, your competence. This triggers the ancient fear of being excluded from the group, which, as we have discussed, was equivalent to death in our evolutionary past. Understanding this does not eliminate the fear, but it does contextualize it. The fear is not a sign that you are weak or incompetent. It is a normal, ancient response to a situation that your brain interprets as socially dangerous. The preparation principle. One of the most effective ways to reduce speaking anxiety is thorough preparation. When you know your material inside and out, the fear of forgetting or making mistakes diminishes significantly. Preparation does not mean memorizing a script. It means knowing your content well enough that you can discuss it naturally, even if you go off script. Life example: David, a senior engineer, was asked to present his team's quarterly results to the executive leadership team. He was terrified, not because he did not understand the data, but because he was not accustomed to speaking to senior leaders. David's approach was to prepare thoroughly. He rehearsed his presentation 10 times, including once in front of his team for feedback. He anticipated questions the executives might ask and prepared answers. He visited the conference room where the presentation would be held and practiced standing at the podium. On the day of the presentation, David was still nervous, but his preparation gave him a foundation of confidence. He knew his material. He had rehearsed his delivery. He had anticipated the difficult questions. The fear was present, but it was manageable. The presentation went well. David answered the executives' questions accurately and thoughtfully. He received positive feedback from his manager and a compliment from the CEO. The experience built his confidence for future presentations. The power of practice. Like any skill, public speaking improves with practice. The more you speak in front of groups, the more comfortable you become. The key is to start small and build gradually. Life example: Maria, a marketing coordinator, wanted to become a better speaker but had no experience. She started by volunteering to lead team meetings, a low-stakes environment where she knew everyone and the stakes were relatively low. After 6 months of leading team meetings, Maria joined a local Toastmasters group. Toastmasters provided a supportive environment for practicing public speaking, with structured meetings, constructive feedback, and a community of people who were all working on the same skill. Maria practiced speaking at Toastmasters every 2 weeks for a year. She gave prepared speeches, participated in impromptu speaking exercises, and received feedback from experienced speakers. The practice was uncomfortable at first, but it became easier with each meeting. By the end of the year, Maria was giving presentations to clients, speaking at industry events, and even considering a career in training and development. The fear had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled her. She had built the confidence to speak in public because she had practiced speaking in public. Social confidence. Social confidence is the ability to interact with others comfortably, engage in conversation, and navigate social situations without excessive anxiety. It is different from extroversion. Introverts can be socially confident even though they prefer solitude. Social confidence comes from 3 sources: practice, preparation, and self-acceptance. Practice means engaging in social situations regularly, even when it feels uncomfortable. Preparation means having a toolkit of conversation starters, questions, and responses that you can draw on when needed. Self-acceptance means being comfortable with who you are in social settings, including your introversion, your awkwardness, or your unconventional interests. Life example: Kevin, an introvert, had always felt out of place at social events. He did not know what to say, felt awkward in small talk, and often left events feeling drained and inadequate. Kevin decided to build his social confidence systematically. He started by preparing a few conversation starters that he could use in any situation. What brings you here? What are you working on lately? Have you been to any good events recently? He also practiced active listening, focusing on asking follow-up questions rather than worrying about what to say next. This took the pressure off and made conversations feel more natural. Most importantly, Kevin accepted his introversion. He stopped trying to be the life of the party and instead focused on having meaningful one-on-one conversations. He discovered that he preferred depth to breadth in his social interactions, and that this preference was not a limitation but a strength. Over time, Kevin developed a social style that worked for him. He was never the loudest person in the room, but he was the person people sought out for thoughtful conversation and genuine connection. His social confidence was not about becoming extroverted. It was about being authentically himself in social situations. Chapter 15: Becoming Unshakable. The ultimate goal of this book is not just to build confidence. It is to build a kind of confidence that cannot be easily shaken by external circumstances. Unshakable confidence is not the absence of doubt or fear. It is the presence of a deep, abiding trust in yourself that persists even when things go wrong. The foundation of unshakable confidence. Unshakable confidence is built on 3 pillars: self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and self-trust. Self-knowledge means understanding who you are, your values, your strengths, your weaknesses, your triggers, and your patterns. When you know yourself deeply, you are less likely to be thrown off balance by external events because you have a stable internal reference point. Self-acceptance means embracing all of who you are, not just the impressive parts but also the flawed, imperfect, human parts. When you accept yourself fully, you do not need external validation to feel worthy. Your sense of worth comes from within, not from others' opinions or achievements. Self-trust means believing in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. This does not mean believing that you will never fail. You will. It means believing that you can survive failure, learn from it, and emerge stronger. When you trust yourself, you can face uncertainty with courage because you know that you have the resources to navigate it. Life example: Maya, a woman in her 50s, had spent most of her life seeking validation from others. She changed her appearance to please her parents, chose a career to impress her peers, and stayed in a marriage to avoid judgment from her community. By the time she reached 50, she was exhausted and empty. Maya embarked on a journey of self-discovery. She worked with a therapist, read widely, and spent time in reflection and meditation. She asked herself questions she had never considered. What do I actually want? What do I actually believe? What kind of person do I actually want to be? The answers surprised her. She wanted a simpler life than the one she had built. She valued creativity and connection over status and wealth. She wanted to paint, travel, and spend time with people who knew and loved the real her. Maya made changes that were terrifying but necessary. She left her marriage, downsized her home, and started painting. She lost some friends who did not understand her choices, but she gained a community of like-minded people who supported and encouraged her. Maya's confidence was not based on success or achievement. It was based on self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and self-trust. She knew who she was, accepted herself fully, and trusted herself to build a life that reflected her authentic values. This confidence was unshakable because it did not depend on external circumstances. Resilience, the ability to bounce back from setbacks, is a key component of unshakable confidence. Resilience is not about avoiding difficulty. It is about navigating difficulty without losing yourself. Resilient people view setbacks as temporary rather than permanent, specific rather than universal, and external rather than personal. They do not see failure as evidence of their inadequacy but as evidence that they are trying, learning, and growing. Life example: James, an entrepreneur, experienced 3 business failures before his 4th venture succeeded. Each failure was painful. He lost money, lost relationships, and lost confidence temporarily. But each time he recovered. James' recovery process followed a consistent pattern. After each failure, he allowed himself to grieve, to feel the disappointment, the frustration, and the shame. He did not suppress these emotions or pretend they did not exist, but he also did not let them define him. After a period of grieving, James analyzed what went wrong. He identified the mistakes he had made, the lessons he had learned, and the skills he had developed. He used this analysis to improve his approach for the next venture. James' resilience was not about being tough or stoic. It was about being honest, reflective, and committed to growth. Each failure taught him something that the previous failures had not, and each recovery strengthened his confidence in his ability to handle adversity. The long game: building unshakable confidence, is not a quick project. It is a lifelong practice. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, and periods of regression. This is normal and expected. The goal is not to achieve permanent confidence, but to develop the tools and mindset to rebuild confidence quickly when it is shaken. The most confident people you know are not people who never doubt themselves. They are people who have learned to doubt themselves without being paralyzed by the doubt. They feel the fear and act anyway. They make mistakes and learn from them. They fail and recover. They are imperfect and they are okay with it. Life example: at 82 years old, Warren Buffett still gives himself a grade of A+ in some areas of his life and a D- in others. Despite his extraordinary success, he is honest about his weaknesses and comfortable with his imperfections. He continues to learn, grow, and adapt, and he attributes much of his success to the confidence he has built over decades of practice. Buffett's example illustrates an important truth: confidence is not a destination, it is a journey. The goal is not to arrive at a state of permanent confidence, but to develop the capacity to act confidently in the moments that matter, even when you are uncertain, afraid, or doubtful. As you finish this book, remember that the journey to confidence has already begun. Every insight you have gained, every technique you have learned, and every commitment you have made has moved you closer to the confident, authentic, unshakable version of yourself. The work continues, but so does the progress. Trust the process, trust yourself, and keep showing up. The best is yet to come.